Let me get to another game that, unfortunately, because of the weather situation in Louisiana, has become even more complex. And that's arguably the most interesting game in the SEC. I know Georgia Clemson fans would disagree, but I am intrigued by LSU going out to UCLA. What about it?
Well, this has been a game that I've kind of had circled, actually. We called the UCLA game last year, Paul, against USC. And while nobody's making USC out to be the world beaters that they once were 15 or 16 years ago, that USC team was pretty solid at times last year. And when they played against UCLA, UCLA was up to the task. They were extremely physical. Some of the things they did in the run game were really difficult on the USC defense. And UCLA has better personnel that has played a lot of football. And Chip Kelly, when he got there a few years back, he basically said, hey, I'm going to start a bunch of young guys and let's see what happens. Well, he started those young guys and things didn't go very well those first couple years. Started to make some progress last year. In the games that they lost, they were still very competitive. And now all those guys that he started as freshmen 4 years ago are now seniors. And they understand the nuances of what they want this offense to be. They understand how to put challenges on the opposing defense. And if I look at LSU last year, and look, I understand very much that they went and got a new defensive coordinator, Durante Jones. They're very excited about what that defense could potentially be based on personnel. But last year's LSU defense gave up a lot of free yardage, a lot of big plays. They would have busts, they would have miscommunications. If you do that against UCLA, UCLA doesn't have the same talent that LSU has, but the scheme has complexities that LSU will have a difficult time simulating in their week of practice leading up to the game. Now, couple that with the fact that UCLA is coming off of a really good performance, I think it's a very difficult test for LSU, and people are looking at it and saying, no, LSU is gonna mop it up. Well, the last time an SEC team went out west to play UCLA, that was Texas A&M, and they gave up a big fourth quarter lead, ended up losing that game. So it's not unprecedented. LSU's gonna have to play really good. I think they're the better team, and ultimately I think they win the game. But I think there's a lot of reason that it could be uncomfortable, especially if that LSU defense doesn't shore up in some of the ways that they struggled last year.
And Greg, curious about the week for LSU, being in Houston, away from their natural habitat. Explain if it. I mean, it would be different, but what happens if you're a player and you're worried about your family, you're worried about your friends, and you're not where you normally are?
I mean, players have to compartmentalize challenges like this on a pretty regular basis, but this is one, it's difficult to create precedent for it. Obviously, the Gulf Coast is no stranger to challenges as it pertains to weather. And these young men, I mean, several of which have experienced different types of distractions. But this is different. It's just your hometown in some cases, and you don't know what it's going to look like when you get back. So I think that's really difficult to think about what's going on. And yes, we love football. We've put a ton of work into football. This is our livelihood potentially. A lot of these guys have professional aspirations. But it's hard to just forget about everything that could be happening in your hometown or in your state or to your family. So I think it's a very difficult thing to try to prepare for a game, something that might not matter in the eyes of some when there's so many other things that are going on, so many other distractions that might be going on in these young men's life. Of course, as players, you have to compartmentalize some of that, but sometimes it's human nature it's difficult, I think, in some cases to focus on football when there's bigger things in play. And I think we're all thinking about our friends. Paul, I know you have a lot of friends that are scattered throughout the state of Louisiana. I have friends that are in New Orleans, friends that are in Baton Rouge that have been heavily impacted, hopefully not to the extent in which we've seen in the past. So I think it's a difficult thing, having to bus overnight, being out of your comfort zone, being kind of unfamiliar with the terrain. It can be unsettling, but it doesn't change the fact that on Saturday, they're going to still have to put their best foot forward and hoping for LSU players that they'll be able to do so.
Greg McElroy joining us on some of the biggest games of Week 1.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.